Mananasiduus Iminatrentaishatina Legislature in Guahan is now called to order. We're back from recess. Yesterday we left off on second reading. We are on bill number 249-37 COR, introduced by Senator Sabina Flores Perez. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Good morning to my colleagues, and thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill 249-37 as amended by the committee and further amended in committee into the third reading file, and I wish to discuss.
Please proceed.
Bill 249-37 is created to fill an important need for both agencies, Bureau of Statistics and Plans and Guam Environmental Protection Agency, that are tasked to ensure environmental laws are complied with, enforced, and strengthened. Since the inception of the U.S. EPA and Guam EPA in the 1970s, regulatory requirements have grown in complexity and volume, which has more than doubled, in order to protect our natural resources, environment, and which is tied to our health and well-being. Bill 249-37 authorizes both Guam EPA and Bureau of Statistics and Plans Guam Coastal Management Program to hire an environmental attorney for their exclusive use through the classified limited term employment that is tied to the availability of federal funding. This amended and further amended bill by the committee adds another means of hiring an environmental attorney, which is through the RFP process. Both avenues will ensure qualified candidates are selected either through the merit system or RFP process. To adhere to critical and nuanced environmental protection and management statutes, legal counsel for Guam EPA or for the BSP's Coastal Management Program must possess expertise on local and federal regulatory framework and have an institutional understanding of the agency's governing policies and programs. For Guam EPA and also BSP, legal counsel specialized in environmental law is essential for ensuring compliance with and enforcement in accordance with environmental laws and accompanying regulations, including but not limited to the Safe Drinking Water Act, which includes the new finalized regulations for PFAS, the Clean Water Act, Air Pollution Control Act, Guam Pesticides Act, Toilet Facilities and Sewage Disposal Act, Toxic Substances Exposure Compensation Act, Underground Storage and Above Ground Storage Tank Regulations, Water Resource Conservation Recovery Act, Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, also known as Superfund, the OBOD permitting rules, which have been finalized recently, setting interim action levels for Dildren, Litter Control Act, just to name a few. Furthermore, the need for environmental attorney for their exclusive use is clear. Guam EPA Board Chair Carbolito stated, "It is important that there are no time gaps in coverage like they have right now. There should be an attorney contracted for every month of the year from January to December." And further stating, the attorney will be advising the agency on policy updates and developments, notices of violations, operational issues, MOUs, contracts, and other legal related matters that arise weekly, if not more frequently. Guam EPA testified, an in-house legal counsel will help preserve the due process for enforcement and compliance cases, provide guidance and advice when the agency seeks clarity in parts of regulation that are not clear, so that we can make sound government decisions to protect the community. Additionally, an in-house legal counsel will review and draft statutes, rules, and regulations, assist with a review of contracts and RFPs, liaise with the AG Solicitors Division to ensure we're complying with the procurement process. EPA further stated during the public hearing, we've lost a technical asset, one that played a critical role in our agency, not only by navigating the legal system or building a strong case or defense, but ensuring our rights and the rights of those accused of wrongdoing are not violated. Additionally, US EPA has been supportive of Guam EPA to use its federal funds towards legal counsel, which was used to pay for the assistant AG, and federal fund requirements brings additional accountability of its use. Pertaining to BSP, Administrator Edwin Regis also testified the complexity of mandates that the agency faces that includes assessing the comprehensive effects of federal actions or local actions funded by federal funds through the federal consistency process. And as the chief planner of the government of Guam, having to deal with the complexity of developing and resolving a series of comprehensive development plans since the 1970s towards the effective management of our natural resources. Administrator Regis further testified that negotiations and the coordination prior to any legal action is the need for legal counsel for negotiations prior to legal action is necessary. He provided two key examples. One, the first example was there was a time when money was appropriated to construct a culvert in Tumon to dump all the runoff into Tumon Bay. And the Corps of Engineers at the time determined that it was not going to be a direct discharge into the waters of the U.S., but by having an attorney at BSP on staff at the time, we were able to make a strong argument that the water that they were going to divert into the sandy area of Tumon does constitute waters of the U.S. And so it is through that, having strong legal representation in negotiation phase, we are able to win that argument. The other example he provided was that the dredging in Upper Harbor to lay cable landings was an issue that we had to work internally with our attorney at the time and DOD attorneys and then come up with a resolution. There are also other important issues that can be addressed by having an attorney. That's not necessarily manifests itself in the action of an assistant attorney general winning something in court. It could also be used to improve the clarity of administrative adjudication of the rules. He states part of the issues on why laws are not enforced is because the rules are so antiquated. For example, fishing regulations. He states, I think you can catch like 100 balati or something a day per person. But the action necessary to update these rules is an administrative challenge. So our focus is on the administrative process that helps to improve and provide clarity to regulations, and so that this is how the attorney would benefit us as an example, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's a case that would have to be sponsored by the Assistant Attorney General. Again, Bill 249 was created to meet a need by these agencies to strengthen their capacity to carry out this important work in an ever complex and evolving regulatory framework to protect our drinking water, our land, our ocean from pollution and contamination, the very foundation of our survival here. We are fortunate to have these resources, the lands and ocean for our people that we have harvested for millennia, and an aquifer and freshwater rivers that we must protect for future generations and millennia to come. I ask for my colleagues' support in this important measure to help fill this void that these agencies face and to help support the strengthening of our regulations, ensuring enforcement and compliance of our environmental laws. Sijus Masi.
Sijus Masi. Senator Perez, on the bill, is there anyone who'd like to be recognized on the bill as amended? On the bill. Senator Brown, on the bill, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I certainly appreciate the efforts of Senator Sabina to introduce this legislation, but I do have some questions, having worked at Guam EPA for close to 4 years. I don't doubt there's a need for legal counsel, but I also want to know what the legal counsel is going to be doing, because if it's pretty much solicitor's work, my concern is actually what's involved in actually prosecuting these cases, which we have seen time and time again. While we talk about the importance of environment in our community today, and certainly we talk about it a lot more than we did 30 plus years ago, almost 34 years ago when I was the deputy at Guam EPA, the actual enforcement to me has been questionable, because every day I can just go around the island and I see there's tremendous amount of enforcement that needs to be addressed that has not been addressed. And as I've said publicly, Guam EPA needs to sharpen their teeth. It's nice that they're there, but we've seen how they've been behind the ball with regards to enforcement, and that's my main concern. I mean, it's nice to have an attorney look at the regs, but I will tell you, looking at the regs ain't an 8-hour job, 5 days a week, every week of the month of the year. That's not the reality in the actual operations of that agency. What actually matters, because Guam EPA does have extensive authority, is their ability or their need, or what I see as sometimes their inability to effectively enforce these laws. And so I wanted to ask, how effective is the attorney that's going to be hired in this position going to be able to address enforcement? Because if they're simply the attorney at Guam EPA, they will not be the individuals prosecuting these cases. And we've seen time and time again, even through the Attorney General's office, doesn't matter whose term and who's in serving as Attorney General, environmental laws are at the back of the list with regards to enforcement. It's very much the same, even with aquatic and wildlife under Department of Agriculture, in terms of actually prosecuting cases and environmental violations that we see every single day out there in our community. So I wanted to ask the sponsor of this bill, what involvement, if any, is this attorney going to have with regards to prosecuting or pursuing enforcement of these environmental violations that are out in our community?
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Yes, I do. And like the Senator's question, I do also appreciate, I do have, I think it's also, I agree with the concern that there is a need to beef up enforcement. So the AG is the one that is the chief, has the chief prosecutorial role. And so what I envision this particular legal counsel, so in addition to any kind of prosecution in courts or court action, there is notice of violations that need to be upheld. And so this is what the challenges these EPA is facing, is that they don't have this legal counsel to help them to interpret these laws, and some of which are some of these laws which are not that are not as that are not updated or antiquated. And so they are looking for, you know, consistent legal interpretation. That's what they're missing at this moment in time, that they need on a daily basis to interpret these laws amidst all the complexity. So this is a critical part to enforcement, is when these compliance actions or compliance violations are handed out, there has to be a solid legal interpretation and backing that is a formalized legal interpretation. These agencies can always ask a lawyer, but it's not going to help them when it comes time in their board meetings to enforce these notice of violations. And so this is why this bill is needed, is to at least help them get their foot out of the door to begin with. In regards to prosecution, that is the Attorney General's purview. And so just like with DRT has to amass the evidence for any kind of violations or issues with taxes, and then they hand over those documents to the AG to prosecute. This is more of a collaboration type of approach. And so again, this is a basic need of ensuring these civil actions are properly done, and so that the due process is intact too. In regards to prosecution, that is an AG jurisdiction. And so if we want to support more enforcement or stronger enforcement, this legal counsel can definitely support that to ensure the environment is protected. Again, with the testimony provided by BSP, it's a lot of these things don't necessarily end up at the courtroom, but the environmental protections that these lawyers provide in negotiations is also just as important.
Madam Speaker, I certainly appreciate the response by the main sponsor of this bill, but I do have to tell you, I don't have comfort level. I always look for comfort level. I mean, it's nice that we will have an attorney there to interpret and maybe update regulations, because maybe there are some things we need to update, but pretty much not much has changed with regards to environmental enforcement. What we are dealing with is a lack of environmental enforcement. What we're dealing with is the agency not being as aggressive as they need to be, especially when something is literally staring you in the face. We saw what happened at Marbo last year. That was a disaster that Guam EPA in and of itself authorized and did not properly regulate. We saw the outcome of that. We saw the major fire in Harmon where hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of junk vehicles are sitting on that property, and you can't miss it. You go on the ramp heading up to the airport, you will see it. We're not talking 5 cars, 10 cars, even 100. We're talking hundreds of vehicles. And it sat there. And what happened? It got on fire. Now, Guam EPA needs to do a little more every now and then than, oh, this is our notice of violation. This is our violation notice. This is the 10th violation notice we've given. And yet the degradation to our environment continues because of the lack and the inability of the agency to be as effective as it needs to be. And I know I can complain about it because I know what capabilities they have. And when I don't see them execute that, it's very bothersome, especially when the result of that is adverse consequence to our environment. What we saw at Marbo was avoidable. They were not out there enforcing, and yet they permit these projects. And my view of that is you simply, if you can't enforce it, then don't permit it. That's your authority to do that. And if it brings things to a standing halt, then maybe people will start paying attention. That fire in Harmon could have been avoided. But what's the result of that? Even further degradation, because I'm sure the cars that were parked there, the hundreds of cars that were parked there, were not sanitized. And once again, further degradation as a result of it. So while I appreciate the fact that our colleague, and I'll probably vote for this bill, because then it's one less excuse that they can have for not doing their job effectively. Because I will tell you, if I was the attorney, and I'm not, but I'm sure had that been my desire in life, probably I could have gotten a degree and been an attorney. That attorney's going to have time on their hands because they're not going to be sitting there every day interpreting the regulations. And they're not going to be there every day going to the board meeting. And the reality is they will not be out there prosecuting these cases because, as the main sponsor mentioned, yes, it is the responsibility of the Office of the Attorney General to prosecute these cases. And that's where we're lacking. Environmental violations are at the end of the line. Same with natural resource violations out of Department of Agriculture, at the end of the line with regards to prosecution. And yet the harm to our environment is considerable. The harm to our natural resources is considerable. When I was at EPA, we actually did one of the early developments and partnerships in the government of Guam with the Attorney General's office to actually have an Assistant Attorney General not only do the solicitor's work at Guam EPA, but also be involved in assisting the AG's office facilitate prosecution. That's why at the time, the largest violation of wetlands violation in the United States actually happened here on Guam. Actually happened up at Meningan. Because they were moving earth irrelevant and uncaring of the damage they were doing to the resources there. And thank goodness, little old Guam EPA was one of the first in the nation to prosecute a case at that magnitude. Sad to say it had to happen here. But that's the kind of thing we need to see, because when we visibly see these violations, when you drive down the street, particularly lately in northern Guam, the neighborhoods that our people have to endure because of the amount, not just 1, 2, or 3 junk cars piled up. And yeah, I know it's a tough job, and I know there are limited resources, and the staff there is no more than what we had back in the late 1980s and early 1990s when we had enormous amount, and we've not seen it yet except for the military buildup. The amount of construction. Marbo's minor. Marbo's one of how many golf courses we were building, how many hotels we were building, how many other major projects of construction we were dealing with on Guam. With the same staff and limited resources, we could regulate. So there's obvious frustration in my voice because yes, you're looking at probably another $100, $150, $160, $170,000 maybe for the overall package of paying for the benefits and the salary of this attorney. But how does that really translate into effective enforcement beyond shuffling the paperwork? Because it is disappointing to see when you go around this community, and I see it. I'm sure many of the people here see it, but our community sees it. And we've got to have a lot more than just excuses as to why effective enforcement is not happening. And let's not kid ourselves. Passing this legislation here to allow for the hiring of attorney, because there's nothing new about that. The EPA's had attorneys in the past, but it's not going to address the enforcement aspect of it, and that to me is where the need is, so that we move up and prioritize. It's not just so much to get people for doing something wrong, it's to stop these things from happening again. Because if they know that the agency is going to be out there doing their job, then people hopefully will be a lot more conscientious to think, is it worth it? Is it worth doing these kind of violations and degrading our community? And sad to say, there are people out there without reservation that will do exactly that if we don't have effective enforcement. We rely on Guam EPA to make sure that our water is clean and safe, that our soils are clean and safe, that our air is safe to breathe. But if they're not on the ball, and I at times question, I do it during hearings as well, in effectively enforcing these laws, nice as they may be and as many laws as we may pass, it's really not going to address the real issues that affect our people out there. So yes, I'll vote for this bill. I'm not overly impressed with putting an attorney there full-time because, like I said, they will not have a full-time job. It's nice to say all these lists of things they're going to be doing. It's not the reality. But where we really need the help is in prosecuting and addressing these cases. We need the enforcement. And that does not happen with the attorney at Guam EPA. And so I'm hopeful, always hopeful, that more attention will be put on these issues because the continued degradation of our resource and our environment, you know, we're not doing a better job at leaving a better island. We talk about our children, our grandchildren, we hold them with such high care and concern. But in reality, we're not leaving them a better island. We're not leaving them a safer island. So with that, Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to ask questions and comment on this bill.
Sidus Masi, Senator, on the bill. Senator Taitui, you're recognized on the bill.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, and good morning to you and to my colleagues. It's really nice sometimes when we have senators in the hall who've actually been in positions of other agencies that we're talking about, to give us a better perspective of what really happens in there. So my good colleague from ORDOT definitely has a grip on what happens at EPA and the need of EPA and the issues that surround it. I too have reservations with regards to hiring an attorney, a full-time attorney. But then again, you know, according to this bill, there are federal funds that are going to pay for this. So you know me, I'm very tight when it comes to funding. Ask my chair of OFB that I'm very frugal, and I would rather take money to areas that really need it today. Not something a year from now, but what's needed today. I do have a question to the author, if she should yield, and the question pertains to the subject I want to talk about, is the hiring of this attorney. Now, according to the legislative intent, it allows, this federal fund allows for EPA as well as Bureau of Statistics and Plans, in which, if I'm not mistaken, the attorney will be housed under Bureau of Statistics and Plans. I could be mistaken, but please correct me. We have this one attorney working for both agencies, if that's the interpretation of this. And secondly, it already gives them the authority, where it says in the intent that Legislature in Guam finds that both Guam EPA and Guam Coastal Management of the Bureau of Statistics and Plans are predominantly federally funded entities that are permitted to utilize federal funds to hire full-time attorneys to address legal issues pertaining to the environmental law. If that's the case right now, then why do we have this legislation? So that's my first question. And then I have another one if she should yield. Thank you.
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
So I did ask this of the acting administrator who's outside. So if you have other questions as well, whether he believes that they're authorized to hire environmental attorneys, and the answer was no. And so this bill is would make that clear.
Oh, I'm sorry, can you say that again, please?
Okay.
I'm sorry, Senator.
So if I heard the question correctly, if there's already a piece in law that allows for classified limited term, why is this bill needed? Is that
right,
what was
yes.
the question? Okay. Yeah, so I posed that question to the acting administrator, whether he believes they're authorized to hire an attorney, and he said no. So his answer was no, and so this bill would allow that.
Okay, so then the legislative intent is not true to form. It does not allow them, gives them the permission to hire utilizing federal funds, because it says predominantly federally funded entities that are permitted to utilize. So I guess then that means that the federal government will require Guam law to allow it first before giving the funding, if that's the case.
We will proceed shortly. All right, we are ready to resume now. Microphones are working properly. Senator Taitigui, when we left off, you had the floor. You are recognized. Senator Taitigui.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A little technical difficulty with the microphones, but it gave me an opportunity to go out and speak to someone from EPA. And I guess the easiest thing to say is the reason why this bill needs to be proffered is because when it comes to attorney hiring for agencies, only the judicial and the Attorney General's office have the ability to hire attorneys on their own. But when it comes to other agencies like EPA or other agencies, Guam Police Department, et cetera, down the line, they have to get some kind of, well, not permission, but authority to allow them to hire an attorney. So this bill will do that. It'll be codified so that EPA will have the ability to hire an attorney, and it says with federal funds. So I just hope that stays the course, that it will be federal funds. Because the concern I have here too was another question. So that answers my question. So the other question I had was, we have a Bureau of Statistics and Plans has a testimony. And in the testimony, it clearly says that BSP is in support of this legislation. However, we kindly seeking a change to the language of Bill 249 to include additional language to address potential hiring and funding challenges to read, the attorney shall be hired as a classified or unclassified basis to include but not limited to temporary appointment, limited term appointment, competitive limited term appointment. And none of this was incorporated in the amended version. And so my question is to the authors, why was that not incorporated, specifically since it looks like this bill is to help both agencies, EPA as well as Bureau of Statistics and Plans, which I have another question on that because according to EPA, this is just for them, not Bureau of Statistics and Plans. So the first question is, why wasn't that section from BSP incorporated into the amended version?
Senator Taitigui, can you clarify which section?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this was a testimony submitted by Bureau of Statistics and Plans on March 5th, 2024, to the chairperson of Environmental Protection Agency, etc. And it was signed by Lola Leon Guerrero from Bureau of Statistics and Plans. That section is on the first page of that testimony in the second paragraph. I believe it's on page 35 of the committee report.
But in the bill, is there a difference that you're pointing to in the bill?
Yes. By incorporating what they ask for by temporary appointment, limited term appointment, competitive limited term appointment, classified or unclassified, these were suggested to be placed into the bill.
All right. Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Okay, so this bill would allow for a classified limited term. That's what the section 4103G and 4103H allow. As far as unclassified, so that is a policy decision regarding whether to uphold the merit system, and being that this is not a political hire, I wanted to kind of stay true to the merit system, which is why I stuck with a classified limited term versus an unclassified. And each agency is treated the same, so there's no difference in the bill. If you look at both sections of the bill, one for BSP and one for Guam EPA, they have identical language in regards to the hiring of an attorney through.
Senator, I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. If you could, yeah.
So I guess the question was asked whether why wasn't classified or unclassified limited terms or limited term appointments incorporated into this bill. And so that is a policy decision that I wanted to, basically the policy decision was to maintain the merit system. And so in current law, there is the ability to hire a classified limited term, but there's nothing in law that allows for unclassified limited term at this point, I believe that's a policy decision that was made, and I guess this is open to discussion in regards to allowing for unclassified limited term attorneys. And my thoughts are regarding unclassified hires. It's generally that it should be really limited to more of a political hire versus a civil service worker, and that's my my take on it. So the classified limited term is already incorporated in law, but we're just now expanding it towards attorney hiring for these two agencies. But the unclassified I did not include, which is open to discussion and dialogue today.
Senator Taitakui.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, for that. You know, by hiring someone who's classified versus someone who's unclassified, it's a huge difference between the two. You know, what they say, you know, classified employee, to fire a classified employee is like an act of Congress in the government. It becomes very, very difficult. But I understand wanting to take the politics out of it, but you really, you really can't when it comes to hiring individuals at the government of Guam. I would rather see something that's unlimited, a limited term appointment, competitive. I mean, I guess it's a policy that they can, according to this, they can hire whether it is limited term or competitive limited term. If the author says that 4103G, 4103H covers those areas. Wow, okay. Secondly, I had an opportunity to speak with EPA, who's outside. I didn't see Bureau Statistics and Plan, and he was under the impression that this is for EPA, for them to be able to hire an attorney and not to be shared with Bureau Statistics and Plans. So is that the, can they explain that situation, please?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, sorry, I almost did it again. Yeah, so that's why the exclusive use. So basically each section states exclusive use for that particular agency. So it's not going to be shared with the attorney that's hired by EPA is not going to be shared with the attorney. It's not going to be shared with the other agency. So that's why the words exclusive use is there in both sections.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Senator Paris. So it sounds to me like we're hiring two attorneys here. This bill will allow for 2 hires of an attorney, and depending on who the director is, can hire this person using federal funds. And that's my last question, Madam Speaker. Is there anything in here stopping the agencies from using general fund money to pay for these attorneys, or is it only hired using federal funds? What happens if the federal funds run out is the question. Do we have to go to the general fund now and subsidize? That's a question I have to the author.
To the sponsor, yield to that question.
Yes, I do. And so this bill explicitly states federal funds, not local funds general fund money. So that is why it's a competitive limited term appointment.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you, Senator Paris. And thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on this measure.
We're going to take a 1-minute recess. We're back from recess. We're still on Bill 249-37 COR. Anyone like to be recognized? Senator San Augustine, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I like the intent of trying to hire an attorney for EPA and for the Bureau of Statistics and Plans and Coastal Management Program. I just have reservations on the bill, the way it's written. And what led me to have reservations is just reading the legislature's intent. It talks about so much how government agencies are allowed to hire attorneys. Okay, so why do we need a bill? Next one is, you got this statement, notwithstanding any other provisions in law. Oh, wow. We're talking about authorizing federal funds. If it's a federal grant, you write it in the grant, requesting the authorization to use federal money to hire an attorney. And if that's approved by the federal grant, then you just do that. And you worry about everything else. Then on the next statement, the attorney shall, and it's on both sections of section 2 and 3. Hiring a classified employee. You hire somebody under federal grants, or in federal, it says federal program, but it's really federal grants, okay, federal funds. When the funds run out, as a classified employee, the GovGuam has to now fund the position. I don't think that was ever the intent. The likelihood is that will the Bureau of Statistics and Plans and Coastal Management or EPA ever run a federal program? I doubt it. I doubt they'll ever lose the federal programs. Why? That's basically how they're being run today, by federal funds. And that being said, my reservation is the classified part and the word notwithstanding. Why, maybe the author can explain to me why the word notwithstanding is there. Just authorize them to hire under their federal programs. And I could support that, that's easy. But if you have no notwithstanding, I'm like, what is the tie to this? Why do they need to be notwithstanding? And maybe she can explain that, Madam Speaker, if she'll yield to that question.
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Yes, I do. And it was asked earlier by a colleague, why is this bill needed? And currently, authorization of hiring an attorney is restricted to, AG's office, judiciary. I believe there's others like even having a counsel, a procurement counsel. So it has to be specifically authorized. And so currently in law, there's nothing authorizing these two agencies to hire an attorney. So that's why this bill is needed. In addition to the need that I expressed during the opening statement, there's a large volume and complexity of environmental law that these agencies have to contend with. Yeah, basically this bill was in response to the need. In regards to, I forget, there was other questions, but maybe if you would like to proffer them, repeat them as well.
Okay, I understand. Then my question is going to be then, because this is a current bill, impacts of what's been going on, because only the Attorney General is allowed to hire an attorney. Then I got to have reservations with the Attorney General's office then. Why haven't you taken care of these two agencies? That would be my next question. But it's not to the author of the bill, because she has nothing to do with that, but to the AG's office. And how, now to the author, how has these agencies, because you list them both. If it's just EPA, then I know you're EPA, you're the oversight of EPA. But how have they managed without this bill, without an attorney? Basically, they haven't had an attorney, I guess, for I don't know how long. But how have they managed without an attorney? And if they did have an attorney, was that under an MOU with the Attorney General's office that now the Attorney General's office doesn't want to fulfill? Then we need to take a look at why we're funding so much the Attorney General.
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Okay, there seems to be a couple questions in there. So the one question I heard is, how are they able to operate without an attorney? And that is something we do not want to see, because with EPA, they have to uphold the due process especially when a notice of violations are handed out. And so this is why this bill is needed, because the interpretation of the laws are really critical. Even something as simple as interpreting when to pay GSWA, that they need interpretation. So they want to be consistent in how they operate and implement these laws. So it has been very difficult for them since they've lost their attorney. So yeah, it's made the enforcement and compliance actions much more difficult for Guam EPA. In regard to Bureau of Statistics and Plans and the testimony that Administrator Ray just provided, he stated the value that these in-house legal counsels provide was they were able to prevail in negotiations in regards to, for instance, the Tumon culvert. The federal agency, U.S. Army Corps of Engineer, basically was contending that the discharge into public waters does not apply to this, and because they had internal legal counsel to argue otherwise, they were able to prevail. So without an attorney, we're really exposing ourselves to incomplete, insufficient implementation of these environmental laws, which are really meant to protect us. So that is the risk we are taking if we do not have this legal counsel to really implement these environmental laws that are growing and becoming more complex by the day. And then the other question, if you can repeat the question, I believe it was about
the Attorney General. Was there an MOU or something with them?
So that's how they normally operate, that there's an MOA, I believe, between Guam EPA and the Attorney General's office. And so this is not specific to this particular Attorney General, but many Attorney Generals in the past. You know, again, you know, when it comes down to it, oftentimes the environment is, you know, the criminal cases, you know, family division, you know, they take the priority, right? Environmental laws tend not to be the priority. And so that's why the importance of this bill is to ensure that consistency, that there is going to be in-house legal counsel to ensure that protections are consistently applied. And so, yeah, that's the importance. Situs Masi.
And thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the author. I agree with you. That has been their habit at that office that you mentioned. When they're supposed to take care of you, EPA or Bureau of Statistics, they come up with every reason why they can't. And I agree with you. The EPA does need an attorney, no doubt. Just the question of classified now is going to be my concern. Because when you run out of federal money, it becomes a GovGuam general fund burden. And if you said unclassified, go for it. I understand you explained the notwithstanding. I'm good with that. And with that, Madam Speaker, thank you very much.
Situs Masi, Senator, on the bill, is there any other senator who'd like to be recognized? Senator Kanata, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to get clarity on the funding. It will not impact any projects or any current programs that the agency is offering, correct?
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Sorry, can you rephrase the question?
I just wanted to clarify the funding source is not going to be impeding or impacting any of the programs that the agency is currently providing. We're not redirecting any revenues to support this legal counsel, correct?
Okay, so just to give an example with Guam EPA, they've always had federal funding to fund the assistant AG, and now that you know, there's no employee there, and so they've always had that set aside for them. So it's not going to take away from the other federal funds that are used to pay for other operations or programs. So that was already set aside. With BSP, in their testimony, they did talk about that the Coastal Zone Management Act, which is funded through Congress, has bipartisan support, And they basically stated at the public hearing that they feel confident that they will be able to get funding for this attorney. So again, it would not take away from their current programs, but enhance it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that sentiments. I just again wanted to, raise the issue that also we have another agency, Chamorro Land Trust, that has the same representation appointed by the AG or a special attorney general, right? So I did have points of interest to introduce legislation in the similar tone that they do have appointed attorneys for agencies, but sometimes there's a hiccup and unfortunately they don't have representation, but I understand that there's a lot of legal concerns that are in both of these agencies that continue to arise, and it is my hope with the support of this legislation that they can amend and find resolve for a lot of the issues that they face on a daily. So I just wanted to raise my support for this legislation. I did talk to the author, and I spoke to EPA individuals outside to ensure that this legislation is well intended and that it's going to be good for the people of Guam. Nothing further, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Senator, on the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? Senator Barnett, you're recognized on the bill.
Good morning to the people of Guam and to my colleagues as well. And I'd like to thank the author for introducing this bill, which I rise in support of. She's been very busy fielding all these inquiries this morning, so definitely commend her for always being able to answer the tough questions about any legislation that she puts forth. So I support this bill. I think it's a worthy investment. Especially when you consider Guam EPA and BSP and where they're positioned in terms of the ongoing military buildup. And, I shudder to think, and it's a little scary for them to be proceeding without legal counsel. So any way that we can hire these attorneys, whether it's going to be classified, unclassified, via contract, I'm pretty sure that the author will hammer that out and secure the support of some of my colleagues who have offered their doubts and reservations on just kind of like the technical side of how these attorneys would be hired. But I think if anything, in any situation, if you're looking for a specialized attorney, issues dealing with the environment is one where it's definitely warranted. And I've enjoyed the discussion this morning. I really appreciate the comments of Senator Brown, who talked a little bit about the enforcement, which I agree is definitely an issue. As you know, coming from the media, that was my beat at KUAM News as I covered the environment. And there were many stories that I covered where it was just downright disappointing, the level of enforcement that we saw from Guam EPA. I was just thinking about a story wherein a Department of Defense contractor, this is a big contractor, I mean, worth billions of dollars. They had violated our environmental laws and basically leaked over 100 gallons of jet fuel from right up the hill here all the way to Dedido. And that resulted in this contractor having to remove over 500 cubic tons of contaminated soil. And initially, Guam EPA had attempted to fine this billion-dollar defense contractor somewhere in the neighborhood of $350,000. But the contractor was able to negotiate with Guam EPA and bring that fine, which I think should have been, significantly north of $350,000, considering, the sanctity of our environment and living on an island, right, where it's very delicate. But instead, they were able to negotiate that fine and that penalty down to $100,000, which, for the infraction and the violation that occurred, I think anybody would agree that that's simply not enough. So, when we talk about enforcement and prosecution, it is important to have that available through the Attorney General's office and the proper channels, but also we have to really encourage Guam EPA to for lack of a better term, throw the book at these violators. I'm just not comfortable with some of the negotiations that go on with these people who have harmed our environment, our very precious environment. There was another story that I had covered where a contractor had been dinged with a notice of violation, and instead of having to pay a significant fine, they were instead offered the opportunity to renovate the restrooms over at Guam EPA. So when we talk about, you know, the prosecution and the punishment of these environmental offenders, it is lacking on all fronts, I think. And so I just wanted to kind of chime in on that. But again, I do rise in support of the bill. And I again commend the author for looking for areas of need. And I think, again, to have this legal representation at these agencies is very critical. I watched an interview a couple weeks ago, and one of the high-ranking officials from, I think it was BSP, was going on and on about his thoughts about the ongoing military buildup and what allowances should be given to the Department of Defense, what allowances should have been given to the military. And the whole time I watched this interview, I thought, wow, this individual is really going way off of their role as a deputy director in this case. And so to have legal counsel or these lawyers available to kind of rein back in and say, hey, maybe that's not your lane, I think would really be very beneficial for us as we move forward in the ongoing military buildup, to really ensure, not just with the buildup, but in all aspects, in all areas of environmental impact, that we are being guided by individuals who have that very specialized knowledge when it comes to environmental law. So again, rise in support of the measure, and I ask my colleagues put Fabot to do the same. Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker.
Sidus Masi. Senator, on the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? If not, then the sponsor may close on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I would like to proffer two amendments based on the discussion today regarding, the reservations of a classified limited term. And so the first amendment is on page 4, line 10 to 13, for the section 1203.1. So this amendment would cross out, I would cross out, in the second sentence, it states, attorney shall be hired, and it crosses out the subsequent language, pursuant to and in accordance to the Guam procurement process for professional services. So the amended bill allowed for two avenues for hiring an attorney. One was through that section 4103G and H, which would allow for the hiring of a classified limited term. So that's the one that got struck out. And what was kept was the RFP process. Again, so the purpose of that was to address concerns about any kind of actions, the civil service actions that could occur from this particular usage of a classified limited term employment. And so that's why this is being struck out. But at least we allow for the other avenue to exist, because again, the need is very real with these agencies, and I wanted to make sure that they have this option to use it, to hire an attorney using federal funds for their exclusive use. So I ask for my colleagues' support. Thank you.
Sidus Masi. So we'll take those amendments one by one. The first one, lines 10 to 13, page 4. On the amendment, is there anyone who would like to speak? If not, then is there any objection to this amendment? If not, this amendment passes. The second amendment is on lines 20 to 22 on page 4, strikes that clause. Senator Perez, did you want to speak?
Yes, so I would like to proffer that amendment. Basically the exact same amendment, but for the different agency of Guam EPA. Again, for the same reasons. The concerns about hiring a classified limited term and how that could impact potential civil service actions, and keep it clean with the RFP process. I ask for my colleagues' support as well.
On the amendment, is there anyone who would like to speak? Is there any objection to this amendment? Seeing no objection, this amendment passes. Or, Senator, did you want to close on the amendment? All right. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, this amendment passes. All right. And on the bill, Senator, you're still recognized.
So proceed to closing? Okay. All right, so I just want to thank my colleagues for the discussion to help make this bill a better bill. I think, yeah, it's very essential that we meet the needs of Guam EP and BSP to help administer their multiple mandates and very complex mandates. Testimony in support of the bill provided by Guam EP and BSP both they expressed their urgent need for legal representation. Guam EPA stated that because they are currently without legal representation, an in-house legal counsel will help to preserve the due process for enforcement and compliance cases, provide guidance and advice when agency seeks clarity in parts of the regulations, many of which have been antiquated and which makes the implementation difficult, and to make sound government decisions to protect the community. Additionally, Guam EPA expressed that in-house legal counsel will review draft statutes, rules, and regulations, assist with the review of contracts and RFPs, and liaison with the AG Solicitor Division to ensure they're complying with the procurement process. BSP reiterate the significance of having legal representation, noting its value is not constrained in a courtroom but expands to the improvement in the clarity of administrative adjudication of rules, often which are antiquated and require updates. The passage of this amended Bill 249 would secure Guam EPA's and BSP's ability to acquire the legal resources to strengthen our local environmental laws and navigate the complex federal laws and regulations. Legal counsel specialized in environmental law is critical in ensuring our government agencies comply, ensuring government agencies' compliance and enforcement under federal laws. And it would help to support the health and well-being of our people. And I ask for my colleagues' support. Sujas Masi.
Sujas Masi, on that motion to place the bill on third reading, is there any objection? The bill is amended on the floor. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on bill number 286-37 LS. Vice?
Speaker Therese, you're recognized on Bill 286-37 LS.
Sujas Masi, I'd like to ask that, or move that the bill as substituted on the floor be accepted, the substitute version. It's been passed
Madam
out.
Speaker, I don't see a copy.
It should be on the left, up there, on the far left.
Please proceed.
Sujas Masi, oh,
To move it,
Yeah.
to move it first, please, and read the title.
Yeah, I'd like to accept the substitute version because this title has also changed in the subversion. So I'm moving to accept the substitute version of 286-37 LS. Subversion reads, an act to amend section 6105B of Article 1, Chapter 6, Title 12, GCA, relative to providing free bus passes to those who lack access to reliable transportation.
On that motion, please proceed. I Are there any objections to accepting the substituted version? Seeing and hearing none, motion carries. Please proceed, Speaker.
Mrs. Masi, so I'd like to move this Bill number 286-37 LS as substituted on the floor to the third reading file. I just read the title, and I'd like to speak on that motion.
Please proceed, Speaker.
Mrs. Masi. So this program is, it's really at the request of some of these agencies who deal with those who really need, in order to comply with what they're being mandated to do, or for example, when CPS is involved with children at risk or parents in those situations, they require them to do certain things, and this is to allow for bus passes for some critical agencies to give to their clients so that they can comply with court orders, for example, or to show up to drug testing or court orders for different things, or in the case with CPS or in the case with public health, to show up for Medicaid interviews, things like that. So it's about ensuring individuals who lack access to reliable transportation can still reach these critical services, such as health care and public assistance, vital for their well-being and stability and their families. So by providing free bus passes, we are potentially helping foster families, individuals facing legal challenges, and those in need of medical or behavioral health services to overcome the transportation barriers that hinder their progress and development. This bill will ensure that people involved in the legal processes, including probation and court-mandated appointments, can attend their hearings and fulfill obligations, reducing the likelihood of unnecessary legal consequences due to missed appointments. The transportation costs, although they seem minimal to many of us, are a burden for many low-income individuals, particularly if these mandates are repeated or on an ongoing basis. So the bill would provide a simple solution by leveraging the existing framework, existing infrastructure of Guam Regional Transit Authority to distribute free bus passes to the agencies where they are most needed. We are anticipating that there should be no additional cost to GRTA because these people will fit into their existing infrastructure and existing routes. There is as well available to the agencies the ability to pursue grants and of course work together with GRTA to thoroughly plan and predict how many riders they will expect to give these bus passes to, so that I thoroughly believe, based on testimony, that these agencies can work together in that regard. So I ask my colleagues to please support the bill as substituted. Titus Masi.
Thank you, Speaker. Anyone wishing to speak on this measure? Senator San Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a simple, I like the bill. Let's start with that. The only thing I got reservations on, but it's minor, is the cost and who pays for it. But it looks like it's something, we need to help our people, okay? That's the bottom line. And if it costs, gosh, $1.50 for a single ride, $4 for a one-day pass, take it out of height, GRTA. We'll identify what your costs and what it drives up, and when we come up to the budget, then we'll fix it from there. But there shouldn't be an issue because every item here that was identified substantiates the need to help the people that don't have the financial means. And like the author mentioned, there are some that may think that this is too small. Why can't they just pay themselves? No. Not everybody is as financially sound as the rest of you. And I like the idea bus passes shall be requested at least 5 business days in advance. I believe that as long as GRTA manages, I have no reason to not support this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator St. Nicholas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is one of the great bills that actually came out from this whole entire session. I like this bill. It helps, those, less fortunate. And the wonderful thing about this is that it also helps foster children. I want to see if I could fit somewhere in here where we could add service-connected disabled veterans, but maybe that's for another radio show. But I think this is a good bill. It's a compassionate bill. It shows, that we do care for those less fortunate and those who are assisting our children in the foster program. So I stand in support of the measure. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator St. Nicholas. Anyone else on the main? Senator Taitegui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the author for this legislation. I did look at the committee report on this, found that there was very minimal cost. I thought that the bill was a way to also to entice people to ride the bus, to ride the Guam Mass Transit. And this would encourage them to do so, especially if there is at no cost. But we do know that this is definitely to help those less fortunate. And I stand in full support of that. I hope we can do more for the Guam Mass Transit and encourage more of our public to use this ability that they have at their taking. I know that there's a lot of issues with Guam Mass Transit they're working on to try and fulfill a time frame. They'd get there on time because a lot of time people say they don't go on this, take the bus because, it's either late, really late, and they miss their appointments. So, whatever we can do to encourage people to go back to using mass transit, because I think this is one area that they're continuing to try to address with all the issues that people have using it. So, and I asked the author of the legislation to put me as the first co-sponsor of this legislation. Thank you.
On that, are you making a motion, Senator Taitegui?
I'm just asking. I'm finished with my opening and
Right, so you
asked the author of the legislation if she would like to make me a first co-sponsor of the legislation. But that's totally up to her. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise in support of this bill, and I'll tell you, I wish we had more bills like this on the floor. I like the idea of the handout. The handout doesn't sustain our people over time, and I think anything we can do to improve the quality and have our own people be able to have the pride in being able to improve their own lives as well, I think is a very good thing. And while it seems like a very small gesture, it's not something that's, thank goodness, it's not overwhelmingly high in terms of the dollar amount, but I think providing the opportunity, we take for granted, we're gonna walk out of here and get in our cars or our trucks and go have lunch or go do whatever it is we're gonna do during our lunch hour. And we don't think anything of it, until it's time to go to the gas station, gas it up, and go again. But there are those in our community that don't have that opportunity, either not necessarily just lack of resource, not everybody wants to drive or desires to drive on our roadway. And you really think about it, what impact not being able to travel. We could go up to the airport and go anywhere in the world pretty much at this point in our lives, and not everyone has that opportunity. They can't get necessarily from one village to the other. And especially if the opportunity is there for employment or getting medical care or whatever the need may be, this is an open opportunity for those out there that need that assistance, and I love that. I want to see people be as productive and engaged as they can be, and that's what we need more in our community. So I certainly am very pleased our speaker has introduced this bill, and I'm very supportive of it. So with that, Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Anyone else on the motion? Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Assistant Majority Leader.
Madam Vice Speaker, you would like to speak on the bill?
Thank you, Zanmanana Sizus. Mr. Speaker, I was earlier looking at the previous bill, but as substituted on the floor, I certainly want to say that I support the intent of this message and sympathize with those who cannot get the social services, medical care, education, or work they need because of transportation issues. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to applaud the author of this measure for proposing a way to help those who cannot afford a car payment or to fill up a tank of gas or even to purchase a government bus pass through the novel idea of increasing the number of riders using the Guam Regional Transit Authority's buses. I do, however, have a few questions for the speaker from Jonia, if she would please yield, and I'll go ahead and clarify. I first want to clarify because while specific agencies are listed in this bill, agencies that shall be provided free bus passes, subsection 3, which is found on line 9, page 4, paints a broader picture where these no-cost passes are provided to a broad group of agencies. So my question to the good author is, does she agree that this provision means the Guam Regional Transit Authority may provide these no-cost bus passes to an agency not listed later in the bill? And I'll give you an example, Mr. Speaker. For example, for students of the Guam Community College and the University of Guam, to the Public Defender's Service Corporation, to the Department of Integrated Services for Individuals with Disabilities, and other government agencies who serve residents that face similar financial challenges affording transportation.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, do you yield to the question?
Sure. Thank you for that question, and I will yield to it. So currently the bill says that they list CPS, GDOE, Department of Public Health and Social Services, GURA, the Judiciary of Guam, Behavioral Health and Wellness, and then later on it says the GRTA may also distribute directly to individuals for the purposes availing of public assistance, medical or behavioral treatment, court or probation related needs, GURA assistance, and GDOE appointments. In addition to what this bill does, GRTA also has already taken upon itself programs to give discounted rates to many of the individuals listed, such as those under 5 have free passes, those persons who are elderly have discounts, and those persons with individuals also have discounts. So these are really for those who they are in our system, they are in our judicial system, they are in our CPS system, they are in our, and I believe public defender would qualify under this judicial system if they're court ordered to do things and the public defender asks the court that also be mandated, that's going to happen. So I hope that we've taken care of those, and I think there's nothing to prevent GRTA from expanding the program, but these are the ones who have specifically spoken up in favor of this and outlining the need for this program. Does
it suffice?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I really appreciate that comment, and I just wanted to make sure that the inclusion of of the Department of Integrated Services for individuals with disabilities, DISID, and like Public Defender's Office. You know that I've worked there for many years on both places, and I just wanted to make sure, because these are a part of those that are within, a lot of those that are within the indigent community and those that really need that support. So with that being said, Mr. Speaker, I also recognize that this universe of agencies and their respective clients could amount to a substantial increase in a demand for the Guam Regional Transport Authority to meet. So according to the information shared at this bill's public hearing, GRTA estimated its services of more than 100,000 fixed route riders for a year. While, Mr. Speaker, while that sounds like a big figure, 100,000 annual riders averages out to about 274 riders each day, give and take. And if we add public school students and those with financial hardships who are served by the Department of Public Health and Social Services, GURA, the Judiciary, Guam Behavioral Health Wellness Center, and potentially even more agencies, it doesn't stretch the imagination that this would double, triple, or even quadruple, or result in an even larger spike in the GRTA's daily riders. So my question to the good author is, what is the strategy to handle this expected spike in riders? Is there one?
Madam Speaker, do you yield to the question?
Yes, Sizus Masi. I guess I do not envision that huge spike in ridership as was described, because this is going to be based on these agencies who are already, mandating that people go get Medicaid or, avail themselves, come to court. They're already doing this, and there are just some particular cases where the reason the person is not doing it, they will tell them it's because I don't have transportation. And that's not every case. It's really just a few cases, I think, within each agency. So we're not telling them to give to everybody. We're telling them to give on a need basis. So it's really to ensure compliance. And I don't think it's going to spike the ridership. Of course, we will see, but we really only estimated, like 60 per month. That's just an estimate that we did, because, like, for example, people who have to apply for GURA, that's not everyone. That's just a few who are not able to provide their own transportation, and it's really just for those.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that. And let me share this perspective moving forward, because I did say I support the intent. And because if we look at other jurisdictions, as many of us are aware, other jurisdictions also offer similar services to their residents facing transportation issues. And I will give you some. In New York City, Justice Program for Students, which gives out about 1.5 million passes a year, $1.5 million of passes a year. And this is funded through a $75 million government subsidy to its transit authority. In Washington, D.C., it costs reportedly more than $100 million to implement its own free busing program throughout the district. Los Angeles implemented a new program that gives low-income residents a $100.50 monthly pass, which costs a reported $18 million. That cost doesn't include the funding needed to pay for similar bus fare programs that help K through 12 students, Guam community, community college students and seniors. So I am well aware that these jurisdictions are much, much larger than Guam, and their investments would eclipse the costs associated with Bill 286. But I bring this information to the floor to show that there is a cost to offering this noble lifeline. And when the government offers this lifeline, the government must pay for it. So my question to the author is, has there been any estimate completed on what this bill would cost? and how we are going to fund these costs. Has GRTA given any indication that it can afford to purchase the buses and hire the drivers and fund maintenance that will now be needed to shuttle all the new riders it will need to transport through this bill? And I'm just bringing up that perspective as part of this planning that we need to envision.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, do you yield to the question?
Yes, sure, I will yield to that question. And first of all, I think the program that's being described from other jurisdictions is a completely different program. I wish that's what we were proposing here, free bus services for all these categories. We're not. We're providing free passes to certain agencies for those who they believe are in the greatest need, and they're going to have to work within the number of passes that they get to prioritize those who really need to make these appointments. And for example, this is not to fund children getting to school. That's not what we're proposing. We're proposing that sometimes GDOE mandates parents and students that they must attend counseling sessions in order to continue in school, different things like that. And in order to make those appointments, that's what these passes are going to be. So they're quite limited because we've already got programs that are funded, and we are funding with our general fund busing for school children to get to school. And we are funding GRTA at its current levels. So we believe these number of, for example, GURA assistance, medical or behavioral treatment, court or probation related costs, and those who need to avail of public assistance, such as those parents whose children are under CS supervision and cannot get their children back until they avail themselves of Medicaid or some other standard of living, then that's how these agencies are going to be able to manage the programs. And of course, GRTA is going to manage the program through its board by, putting caps when necessary on what they can provide, and then the agencies work within what they have been given to prioritize. And so it's not that free busing as I would love to do that today, but we did not program that in our budget, and so we believe that the costs for this bill are really going to be absorbed by the current GRTA operations, that they are going to just continue with the current routes, and these people are going to be able to get on those routes without paying. However, these routes are running anyways, and we are funding these routes, and we are funding, the employees at GRTA, et cetera.
Thank you. Thank you so very much to the author. I truly appreciate that, because we want to be able to share in the clarification and the reason why this program is needed. My last question, Mr. Speaker, is just to clarify, because we all know that poverty is more often a long-term issue and not a temporary setback. It can take months and years of hard work to change your financial position, right? So, and if we are talking about how long it takes someone working 2 part-time jobs to save up enough for a car, it certainly will be longer than 30 days. So my question to the good author is, does she agree that this bill as written does not limit a person to just a single 1 day or a 1 month bus pass, and that a student or a client can receive a new pass each day or month as long as their financial need still exists?
Situs Masi, I will yield to that question as well. And the intent of the bill is that it's going to be up to the agencies to decide how many bus passes do you need to comply with our mandates, and such as CPS. So, and on subsection 3 on page 4, it says 1 month or daily bus passes. So that's going to be at the agency's discretion. For example, if you're ordered to show up, once a month, then you don't need a month-long pass. You need a 1-day pass per month, right? So they're going to be able to have that flexibility to justify. The agencies will have the flexibility to meet each of their clients' needs. I also wanted to point out the fiscal note on the bill, which shows the revenue that GRTA brings in every year. Fiscal year 2020, it brought in total revenue per year through bus fares, $2,625. FY21, $2,923. FY22, $3,393, and FY23, $2,867. So we are absolutely subsidizing mass transit. They are not self-sufficient with the fares. I know they're working towards that, but so that's why I believe there will not be, I mean, the fare impact is really not the critical issue here. It's really the cost on the other end of not getting these people to where they need to go, for example, probation, then they will be put in DOC, and we are going to bear huge, much bigger costs on that end.
Does that suffice?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and to the good author who shared her answers to the inquiries I had posed. And the intent to authorize GRTA to provide free bus passes with a 30-day validity to individuals who do not have access to reliable transportation to avail of essential services and attend appointments. And the reason for this was to provide bus passes for those who need to get to those appointments and otherwise have no access to transportation. And as I shared these questions to Mind for Me, I wanted to make sure that the community knows that as we look at this program and we avail these programs to those who really need it, we can see the successes. And as the good author from Jonia said that, yeah, let us as a government provide for these basic services and know that we are, as we look at providing for the welfare, the care, the education, and safety as the basic tenets, and making sure that a program like this will help. I think that the support from our August body is truly needed to support a provision like this or a bill like this so that we can help our community as a whole. And in the event that financial resources are needed because this program will grow and more people will maybe included and may take access to this, then we can always come back to this August body and look and see what other resources we can tap into if that spike is too high, or if the resources or the financial impact to GRTA is needed. And I think that with this program being started and initiated, I'm willing to give it a shot and support the effort. So I want to thank the good author, the good speaker from Jonia, for introducing this legislation and at least giving the authority for GRT to work within. And as she noted, we did look at all the agencies were included in the question, and the agencies that I named, if that inclusion is there or not. And I guess if there's any questions or any concerns that come up to those agencies that were not listed, we can always come back to this August body and make those amendments to make them inclusive. So I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak and rise in support of this measure.
Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. Does anyone else like to speak on Bill 286? I see none. Madam Speaker, you like to close?
Yes, I would, Jesus Masi. And first of all, I'd like to thank my colleagues for their support of the bill, their remarks, and those who attended the public hearing as well. And of course, Senator Parkinson for reporting it out. And I'd like to add co-sponsors, if I may make a motion to add Senators Taitegui, Senator Barnett, Senator Brown, Senator San Augustine, Senator San Nicolas, and Vice Speaker as sponsors to the bill.
Are there any objection to that motion? There being none.
Jesus Masi, and again, this is a start to, what actually DRT has already GRTA has already recognized a need. These agencies have already found their own grants sometimes and own programs in order to do this, use their own funds to do this. So this is just to assist them to continue to do that and show that we are supporting those in need, getting the services they need in order to be successful. And that's what we all really want. And I think that's going to be even financially and generally better for our community. Situs Masi for your support, colleagues. So move again, reiterate my motion to place the bill 286-37 LS as substituted on the floor and amended on the floor to third reading.
Thank you. Are there any objections? There being none, so ordered. At this time, we're now recessed till 2 p.m. Thank you.